Alright, going down the list of different things. So, the first is the light intensity, which you can see it makes things lighter or darker. I think most base game keep things around 50. Ambient color and diffuse color, which are basically two sides of the same coin to an extent, as they both basically add a filter to the map. They start at black and white, so you need to choose something lighter than black and darker than white if you want to add color. And the nice thing here is you can combine two colors together, sometimes in a pretty way and sometimes in an ugly way. It takes some experimentation and practice. So you can see some variation here. All right. Specular color refers to the color that things shine, I guess is the best way to put it. I'll make it pink. The easiest way to see it is usually on vehicles, less than structures here. You can see the pink on the wheels here. It's basically like if an object, like certain Bespin buildings have it as well, like you can see it here. If the object has a part of it that's supposed to be shiny, what color is it going to shine by default? And this goes for textures as well. But you can override a default for each texture individually, but not so everything else, I guess. Shadow color is, well, let's start with the angle because this determines what direction the shadows are going to go in the first place, and the light source. And this is actually something that is kind of fun to mess around with, but can also have a much greater impact than you might think. Shadow color is the color of the shadow. Exactly what it sounds like. Usually you want something around this. I don't know if you can see the text box. I hope so. Or the texture box. But you usually want something close to the gray range. You can make it any color you want, but I would say make it closer to gray. Like a blue gray, a pink gray, a green gray, a red gray. Those colors tend to be pretty good. Fog color. Let's first enable fog. It's white. As you see, the further we go back, the more buildings turn white. So I've seen a lot of custom things that they start with 0. I don't recommend this, as it can sometimes be overly strong. It really depends on what kind of map you're going for. In some cases, if you're making a space map, for instance, like a barren asteroid, it might make sense to just not have fog at all, or to make fog be really far away. But basically, fog start, fog end is exactly what it sounds like. What range does the fog begin at? 300. That means everything within 300 is not going to have any fog, and then starting at 300, it's going to slowly get stronger and stronger until it becomes the exact color this at 10,000 distance. If I make that 3,000, that makes a lot of stuff, and the only thing you're going to see is basically some details, the white, and then the dark gray-brown shadow. You can actually do a lot with this, but I recommend making it match the weather. This, I don't know if this actually matters, but I think it's good for posterity to label this. Rain constant, fog, blue. But again, this is one of those colors that typically you want something closer to gray, similar to shadow. And I would generally recommend starting above 1,000 and ending around 4,000, but it can vary. In some maps, you don't want things to go completely blue, but you want it to still have an effect. So maybe going really high does make sense, so that this starts to turn blue, but it's still not blue. You have to mess around with it, and it varies from map to map. Just be sure to look at the map from angles like this to get an idea of what is impacted, as well as from the player perspective, because if you're doing something like this, it's a bad idea. This is a range I usually go with because I think most maps are close to 3,000 to, I guess, 8,000 in size. It can vary a lot, but usually 6,000 is a safe-ish number. 1,000 is a safe number to start at. It can vary. I don't actually know what force field alignment does. I just leave it checked. That's something I would like to know what it does. This is, it's similar to specular color, the shiny, except it's different. It basically functions on one side. I guess the two sides from the light source, like if it's coming from one angle, one side will be pink and the other side will be blue. Or I guess that matches specular color. Let's go with something very different. Red. Red and what color have I used? Or I guess pink and orange is probably more distinct. All right. So one side will be pink and one side will be orange. And this is very literal here, but it's not always quite this strong. This is actually a good setting to mess around with, experiment with. And you can tone it down a bit, which is probably not a bad idea depending on what you're looking for. And this is one of the instances where I think strong colors are okay, but they can sometimes be a bit much. You can see some objects are very strongly affected by specular color, or the shiny effect here. So sometimes you want the specular color to just be black. Not always, but like sometimes that's just a valid choice. All right. Sky domes. We have the TR ones. I don't recommend using any of these. These green screen ones. Bespin clouds. TR night. You have the TR ones, and these are basically just painted objects. They don't move. They just are really big, and they are all encapsulating. Some of them do weird stuff like this, not perfectly synced or aligned. That is what it is. The base game ones, the bigger versions of the base game ones. Let's try Merc. Now there is, let's see if I can break it. You may or may not have noticed this, but sometimes, oh, there it is. The edge of the edge of the skybox will break. It triggers on some maps easier than others, but it does happen. And what I recommend is you can have as many nature settings as you want, but just do 1 to 3 and have them all use the same skybox. Then go underwater and see this color, sky color. Make that sky color match the cutoff point if you can. And while I'm doing this manually, one trick is to just go into existing maps and like add to custom colors. Maps that you know are already aligned like this. So that's pretty close. So that when this breaks, you can tell the difference, but it's not as drastic. I would not worry about this transition so much as just, because most of the time players are either going to see this or they're going to see this. They're not going to see the transition. That's somewhat rare, but it can happen, I suppose. Back to nature. The secondary sky domes. We have the low orbit ones. This one, I think we should probably delete it because it obviously doesn't work. We also have these planet ones, but I actually don't recommend them because we don't have a really great space sky dome. So I asked for them, but I'm probably going to delete them, honestly, because they don't really seem to work where I need them. So you have, let me try turning off all the sky domes. 1 second. All right. Thanks, autosave. Sky domes can be weird because, as you can see, we just left some stars from existing. Okay, here we go. Planet rings. Planet rings. You can see these for yourself. The main thing I would add is that don't sleep on the nebula ones. They can actually look pretty good with certain combinations sometimes. Not these. This does not look good, but sometimes they can look very good. And then there's urban traffic, which we have actually edited in the TR version so that the traffic is much higher so that it's not blocking the player view. So that's nice. Also, you can rotate these. I don't recommend doing this most of the time. I don't recommend doing it for these either, but you can feel free to rotate them like this. All right. Clouds. So you can see these are basically all the same shaped clouds moving the exact same direction. What I think most people don't realize is that there's more than one cloud option, and technically you can use anything as a cloud. Let me try to find something kind of safe to use here. Cantina Tat. So obviously this does not look good, but there are some options that can look decent in the right circumstances. Let me see here a second. Waterfall. This can look like a storm. If it's a little strong, but if you have the right nature settings, something similar to this could look good. Basically, what you want is a white background with color. There are actually 2 clouds in the settings, but I think people, and actually 3. There's clouds none, clouds 0, 0, which I think like 90% of our maps use, and then there's clouds 0, 1, which are a bit more wispy. You can change the size, and I would generally recommend going above 500, not below. You can change the speed. This is the speed at which the clouds will move. I would be cautious in making them too much faster or slower than 30. You can increase the speed of the wind. And this does not affect the clouds at all. This is actually tied to things that are affected by wind, such as trees. But I would not go too much higher. I don't know what the cutoff point is. I know it goes up to 10. But if you go above a certain point, the trees start doing that long stretching thing where you see them basically crossing the whole map. That's how that happens. Heading is the direction of the wind and the clouds. Generally, you can make it whatever you want, but I would recommend not having it go upwards because for whatever reason, if the clouds are big, going upwards like this, it can be a little disorienting when they're fast. I don't really know the science behind that. It's just something I've observed is that people find them irritating to look at when they go upwards and especially fast. So the heading I would keep to something downwards or left or right. And I would keep them at like a varying speed. I don't actually know what these 3 settings do. These are referred to like basically saving and copying these. I think if you load them, it might reset the cloud settings. And I think if you merge, it does that as well, which I don't really consider a good thing. So I'm going to go ahead and cover water while I'm at it. Water is interesting because it is affected by the sky dome to begin with. You know what, actually, other than sky color, which actually doesn't factor into water too much, if you have a sky dome, the sky color will not factor into water. So I'm going to just cover the basics of how water is affected. So as you can see, the water is affected, however, by this. If you leave it white, it's pretty much going to be a reflection of the sky dome. And in most cases, this is perfectly fine. Desert sky. The one thing I'd watch out for is the night sky, because it makes it a dark blue, which could be pretty. It might be what you want. But if it's not what you want, you might be limiting yourself unintentionally. And Camino is basically this. Like, there's not really escaping it. I should cover water in its own video sometime. But for now, I'll just say don't be afraid to mess with these and these. Oh, and of course, this color affects that cutoff. So generally, just use 1, 2, or 3 sky dome or nature settings per map. Probably, I would say less than 6 is plenty. And keep them a single skybox if it's an animated one. The TR1s are not animated, but they don't break like this, so take that as you will. They don't necessarily look good either. Some of them do, some of them don't. It's going to be situational because it's art, basically. And then try to have your sky dome match the cutoff, the water, as best you can. I'm not doing a great job of that, but whatever. And I think, oh, the lighting, of course. Shadows, just to warn you, if you have grass on screen, they pretty much delete the shadows, sort of. Usually, it depends. Tilt angle, it refers to this. The closer it is to 90, the brighter it gets. I guess you can have the light come from the below as well. I've never done that. Maybe I will sometime. You can see you can make shadows long, make shadows short. I would generally stay between 30 and 60 though. Maybe 1575. Then there's the intensity to compensate for these differences. And you have these two colors and your specular.